Welcome back to Lena's Romantasy Collection. You're about to listen to part 2 of the story where a grumpy neighbor turned out to be the Alpha King of North America. Stop! If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, where Piper puts a "Beware of Dogs" sign on the Alpha's door and accidentally traps herself in his penthouse during a blizzard, pause this video right now. The link to part 1 is in the description and the pinned comment below. Trust me, you need to hear how they met to understand why a fat orange cat is currently running the mafia. Go watch it, then come right back. For my returning listeners, we are jumping forward 13 months. Piper and Bastion are engaged. The pack loves her. Swish the cat tolerates everyone. But there is one big problem. Piper's brother, Thomas. He is planning the wedding, and he has no idea that the groom is a werewolf. Will the secret come out? Will Thomas survive the truth? And what happens when a rival alpha decides to crash the ceremony? Make sure you're subscribed and have that notification bell turned on, because this wedding is about to go off the rails. Let's dive into part 2. Chapter 1. The wedding planner from Hell Life with a Werewolf King was surprisingly normal, provided you ignored the occasional howling at the moon and the fact that the grocery bill for meat was higher than most people's mortgage. Piper Delaney sat at her kitchen island, her head resting on a stack of linen samples. "Ivory," she mumbled into the marble. "Cream, eggshell, bone. Bastion, they are all white. Why are there 50 shades of white?" Bastion Mercier, the alpha of the North American Coalition and currently the man chopping vegetables for dinner, chuckled. "Pick the one that matches the snow," he suggested, his French accent thick with amusement. "Since you insisted on a winter wedding." "I insisted on a winter wedding because I look good in faux fur," Piper corrected, lifting her head. "And because Swish refuses to wear a tuxedo in the summer heat." As if summoned, Swish the orange tabby cat jumped onto the counter. He walked directly across the expensive linen samples, leaving a trail of paw prints, and sat down in front of Bastion. Bastion sighed, put down his knife, and handed the cat a piece of high-grade salmon. "You spoil him?" Piper accused. "He's a tyrant." "He is the beta of this household," Bastion replied gravely. "I simply pay the bills." It had been 13 months since the "Beware of Dog" incident, 13 months since Piper found out her grumpy neighbor was a shifter. It had been a year of bliss, bickering, and Bastion sneaking into her office to leave coffee and kisses. But now they were 4 days away from the February wedding, and the stress was real. Not because of the wolves. The pack adored Piper ever since she fixed the ventilation system in the pack house, but because of Thomas. Piper's phone rang. Incoming call. Thomas, the dictator. "Don't answer it," Bastion warned. "He will ask about the centerpieces again." Piper answered it. "Hello, brother." "Piper!" Thomas's voice was frantic. "I'm at the venue. The florist says wisteria is out of season. Do we pivot to orchids? Or do we go bold with red roses? Also, Patricia thinks the ice sculpture of Swish is too much, but I think it's iconic. Thoughts?" Piper rubbed her temples. Thomas had appointed himself the man of honor and wedding planner. He didn't know Bastion was a werewolf, he just thought Bastion was eccentric, French, and obscenely rich, which Thomas respected. "Thomas," Piper said, "no ice sculpture. And tell Patricia to stop micromanaging the cake." "Listen," Thomas lowered his voice, "I'm just trying to make this perfect. You're marrying a billionaire. The press is going to be there. We can't have it looking like a backyard BBQ. By the way, Bastion's family from Europe, are they really coming? The guest list just doubled. Who are these people? The Council of Elders. They sound like a cult." Piper froze. She looked at Bastion. The Council. The governing body of the European wolves. They were old, traditional, and they hated humans. They were coming for the audit, a pre-wedding inspection to ensure the human queen wasn't a liability. "They're extended family," Piper lied. "Very old-fashioned, just don't make eye contact with them, okay?" "Weird," Thomas noted. "Okay, gotta go. The DJ wants to know if Who Let the Dogs Out is banned. I told him yes." Piper hung up and looked at Bastion. The humor faded from his face. His golden eyes darkened. "They are arriving tomorrow," Bastion said quietly. "Elder Beatrice. She is difficult." "Difficult like Thomas?" Piper asked. Difficult like a hurricane with teeth, Bastian corrected. She does not believe a human can lead. She is coming to find a flaw, Piper. She wants to stop the wedding. Chapter 2. The Audit. The next morning, the penthouse felt different. The cozy, warm atmosphere was replaced by a chill that had nothing to do with the Chicago winter. Piper was dressed in her armor, a sharp navy blazer, tailored trousers, and heels that clicked with authority. She stood by the fireplace, checking her watch. "Stop pacing," Bastian said. He was standing by the window, wearing a black suit. He looked every inch the king today, cold, distant, dangerous. But when he looked at her, his eyes softened. "You are the architect of Aurora Heights. You tame wild gardens. You handle your brother. You can handle Beatrice." "I handle plants, Bastian," Piper argued. "Plants don't have fangs. Does she bite?" "Only verbally," Bastian promised. "If she tries to bite physically, I will remove her head." The elevator chimed. "Here we go," Piper whispered. The doors slid open. 2 massive men in dark suits stepped out first. Enforcers. They sniffed the air, scanned the room, and then stepped aside. A woman walked out. Elder Beatrice did not look like a monster. She looked like a runway model who had aged gracefully into a terrifying matriarch. She had silver hair cut in a sharp bob, ice blue eyes, and was wearing a white coat that cost more than Piper's car. She walked into the living room, her gaze sweeping over the furniture, the view, and finally settling on Piper. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. "So," Beatrice said. Her voice was crisp, British, and utterly unimpressed. "This is the mate." "This is Piper," Bastian said, his voice dropping to that low, warning rumble. He moved to stand next to Piper, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. "My queen." Beatrice raised a perfectly manicured eyebrow. She walked closer, circling Piper like she was inspecting a used car. "She is small," Beatrice noted. "Fragile. Can she run? Can she hunt? Can she bear strong pups?" "I can hear you," Piper said, cutting in. She channeled her inner site manager. "And for the record, I run a multi-million-dollar landscaping firm. I don't hunt, I order takeout. And my reproductive plans are none of your business." Bastian's lips twitched with a suppressed smile. Beatrice stopped. She looked Piper up and down, her nostrils flaring slightly as she scented the air. "She smells like vanilla and defiance," Beatrice sneered, "and cat." At that moment, Swish strolled into the room. Usually, Swish ignored strangers, but Swish, being an excellent judge of character, took one look at Beatrice, flattened his ears, and let out a hiss that sounded like a tea kettle exploding. "Get that vermin away from me!" Beatrice snapped, stepping back. "I am allergic to weakness." "Swish's family," Piper said firmly, stepping between the cat and the wolf elder. "And he's the only one here allowed to hiss in my living room. If you want to stay, Beatrice, you'll be polite, to me and the cat." The room went silent. The enforcers looked nervous. Nobody spoke to an elder like that. Beatrice's eyes flashed, not human blue, but a sudden, violent violet. The wolf was surfacing. "You have spirit," Beatrice admitted coldly. "But spirit is not competence. The council has concerns. A human queen is a liability during a crisis. We are here to assess if you are worthy of the bond." "I don't need your assessment," Piper said, crossing her arms. "I have the ring." "The ring is metal," Beatrice countered. "The crown is blood. We shall see if you can keep it." Chapter 3. The Close Call. The tension in the penthouse was interrupted by the worst possible sound, the front door code being punched in. Beep, 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 click. "Guess who found the perfect tablecloths?" Thomas shouted, kicking the door open. He waltzed in, carrying swaths of blue fabric, completely oblivious to the supernatural standoff taking place in the living room. Piper's stomach dropped. "Thomas, not now!" Thomas stopped. He blinked at the enforcers, who were twice his size, then shifted his gaze to Bastian, who was vibrating with suppressed aggression. Finally, he looked at Beatrice, who looked like she wanted to eat him. "Oh," Thomas said, blinking. "Is this the extended family?" "Yes," Piper said quickly, rushing over to him. "Thomas, this is Aunt Beatrice from London." "London!" Thomas beamed, stepping forward with his hand extended. Charmed. I love the Brits. Do you know the Queen? Well, the King now, I guess. Beatrice stared at Thomas's hand as if it were covered in slime. Who is this loud creature? Beatrice asked Bastian, ignoring Thomas completely. This is Piper's brother, Bastian ground out. Thomas, he is leaving. Nonsense, Thomas laughed. I just got here. Beatrice, love the coat. Very Cruella de Vil chic. Listen, since you're family, you get a vote. Salmon or steak for the reception? Piper wants vegan options, but I told her that's un-American. Beatrice turned her icy gaze to Thomas. I prefer raw meat, she said deadpan. Freshly killed, with the blood still warm. Thomas laughed nervously. Ha, British humor. Dry. I like it. Beatrice took a step toward Thomas. She inhaled deeply, her eyes narrowing. You smell of fear, little man? And cheap cologne. It's Tom Ford. Thomas defended himself, offended. Beatrice, Bastian warned, stepping between them. His voice held the alpha command, a resonance that made the glass windows rattle slightly. Stand down. Thomas frowned, looking around. Did the floor just shake? Is the subway running under the building? Construction, Piper lied, grabbing Thomas by the arm and dragging him toward the door. Thomas, we are in a very important family meeting about inheritance taxes. It's boring, you need to go. But the tablecloths, Thomas protested, resisting. Piper, wait, why are those two guys by the door looking at me like I'm a snack? Because they're hungry. Piper shoved him into the hallway. Go get lunch, goodbye. She slammed the door in his face and locked the deadbolt. She turned back to the room, exhaling a long breath. Beatrice was smiling. It wasn't a nice smile. He does not know, Beatrice concluded. You are marrying the Alpha King, and your own bloodline is ignorant of our existence. You live a double life. This is dangerous. Secrets make you weak. Secrets keep him safe, Piper shot back. We shall see, Beatrice said, smoothing her coat. The audit begins tomorrow. We have a problem with the PAC's new territory expansion in the industrial district. The foundation is sinking. The wolves cannot fix it. If you are the architect, you will fix it. If you fail, the council will move to annul the union. Piper looked at Bastian. He looked ready to murder Beatrice, but he gave a slight nod. This was the test. Fine, Piper said, lifting her chin. Bring me the blueprints. I'll show you how a human fixes a wolf's mess. Chapter 4. The in-laws and the elder Piper was staring at the blueprints for the failing industrial district warehouse, trying to figure out why a building engineered for heavy machinery was sinking into the Chicago mud, when the doorbell rang. Not the polite chime of a guest, but the frantic, rapid-fire pressing of the button that could only mean one thing. Delaney DNA was at the door. Please tell me that's the pizza delivery, Piper prayed, looking at Bastian. Bastian, who was sitting on the sofa pretending to read a financial report while actually keeping a death stare on elder Beatrice across the room, sniffed the air. It smells like suntan lotion and cheap airport coffee, he analyzed, and anxiety. Mom and Dad, Piper gasped. They weren't supposed to fly in from Florida until next week. Beatrice, who was sipping herbal tea as if it were poison, looked up. More relatives? Is this a penthouse or a bus station? Before Piper could answer, the door flew open. Piper really needed to change the code. Robert and Linda Delaney burst in, bringing with them a gust of cold air and an excessive amount of luggage. They were glowing with aggressive tans. Robert was wearing a Hawaiian shirt despite it being February, and Linda was holding a duty-free bag. Surprise! Linda squealed, dropping her bags and rushing to hug Piper. We caught an early flight. We couldn't miss the tasting menu. Oh, look at this place. It's so glass. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad, Piper said, hugging her mother while glancing nervously at Beatrice. You're early. We wanted to meet the fiancé, Robert boomed, walking past Piper and heading straight for Bastian. Robert was a retired dentist with a firm handshake and zero volume control. You must be the French guy. Bastian, right? I'm Bob. Hope you have good dental hygiene. European dental work is hit or miss. Bastian stood up, towering over Robert. Usually, this was the moment people cowered, but Robert just slapped Bastian on the arm. Nice grip, Robert laughed. You work out? You look like you wrestle bears. Occasionally, Bastian said dryly, shaking Robert's hand carefully so as not to crush it. It is a pleasure, Robert. Welcome to my home. And who is this? Linda asked, spotting Beatrice sitting by the fireplace looking like an ice sculpture. Is this your grandmother? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees instantly. I, Beatrice said, her voice cutting through the air like a razor, am Elder Beatrice. I am not a grandmother. I am a council member. Oh, like the HOA? Linda nodded sympathetically. We have a terrible council in our condo complex in Boca. They fined us for having the wrong color wind chimes. I feel your pain, honey. Beatrice looked at Bastian, her violet eyes flashing. Get these humans out before I eat them. Bastian stepped forward, placing a hand on Linda's shoulder. He was charming, smooth, and terrified of a diplomatic incident. Linda, Robert, you must be exhausted. Why don't I have my driver take your bags to the guest suite down the hall? We have a dinner reservation tonight. You can tell us all about wind chimes. Sounds great, Robert beamed. But first, where's the cat? I brought a water gun. Last time I saw Swish, he tried to detach my retina. Chapter 5. The Mud and the Sabotage. The next morning, Piper escaped the family chaos for something simpler, a failing construction site in the middle of a swamp. The test Beatrice had assigned her was no joke. The pack owned a massive distribution center in the industrial district. It was vital for their logistics and for moving sensitive pack assets. But the north corner of the foundation was sinking, cracking the concrete. Beatrice stood on the edge of the muddy pit, wearing pristine rubber boots that probably cost more than the excavator parked nearby. 2 large enforcers stood guard. Bastian was there too, but Beatrice had forbidden him from speaking. The wolves say it is a curse, Beatrice said, gesturing to the mud. They say the land rejects us. If you are to be queen, you must solve what the pack cannot. Piper adjusted her hard hat. She ignored the curse talk and looked at the ground. She walked through the mud, checking the drainage pipes and the grade of the slope. It's not a curse, Piper muttered, kneeling down to examine a fractured pipe. It's physics. She pulled out a laser level. She spent 20 minutes measuring the stress points. Bastian watched her, his arms crossed, pride radiating off him in waves. He loved when she went into work mode. Here, Piper pointed to a cluster of pylons near the riverbank. The water table is high, yes, but look at this erosion pattern. She climbed down into the ditch, ignoring the mud splattering her jeans. She grabbed a shovel and dug around the base of the main support beam. Clang. The shovel hit something that wasn't dirt. Piper cleared the mud away. Wrapped around the concrete piling was a thick, rusted chain attached to a winch system that had been buried underground. The winch was pulling the piling sideways, deliberately undermining the foundation. It's not sinking, Piper announced, standing up and wiping mud from her cheek. It's being pulled. This is sabotage. Beatrice narrowed her eyes. Sabotage? Someone installed a tension rig down here, Piper explained, pointing. It's timed to tighten slowly. Who has access to this site? Bastian growled, stepping forward. Only the construction crew and the subcontractors. Then one of your subcontractors is working for an enemy, Piper concluded. This isn't bad luck. It's an attack. Physics doesn't lie, Beatrice. People do. Beatrice looked at the chain, then at Piper. For the first time, the sneer vanished. You found in 20 minutes what my enforcers missed in 2 months, Beatrice admitted grudgingly. Your enforcers were looking for magic. Piper shrugged, climbing out of the pit. I was looking for a screw-up. It's an engineer thing. Bastian walked over, ignoring the mud, and kissed her hard on the mouth right in front of the elder. Brilliant, he whispered against her lips. Dirty, but brilliant. I expect a bonus, Piper grinned. We have a traitor, Beatrice interrupted, her voice cold. If someone sabotaged the foundation, they are trying to weaken the pack before the wedding. Chapter 6. The Engagement Dinner. If the construction site was stressful, the engagement dinner was a war zone. Bastian had rented out the private room at Le Monde, a French steakhouse, to host the merging of families. At the table sat Piper, exhausted but triumphant, Bastian, on high alert, Thomas, drunk on expensive wine, Patricia, trying to network with Beatrice, Robert and Linda, loud and happy. Elder Beatrice, looking like she wanted to execute everyone. "So, Beatrice," Robert said, waving a fork loaded with calamari. "What do you do in London? You retired, or just rich?" "I manage assets," Beatrice said tightly, cutting her steak. Her steak was extremely rare, blue rare. "Old money, Robert. We do not discuss it." "Gotcha," Robert winked. "Tax evasion. Smart." Piper kicked her father under the table. "Dad, eat your squid." "This wedding is going to be huge," Thomas announced, refilling his glass. "I was telling Bastian we need a theme. I'm thinking Winter Wonderland meets Moulin Rouge. Classy. But with feathers." "There will be no feathers," Beatrice snapped. "It will be a traditional ceremony. Moonlight, vows of blood, silence." "Sounds like a funeral," Linda noted cheerfully. "Piper, remember your cousin's goth wedding? It was like that, very depressing." Bastian placed his hand over Piper's on the table, squeezing gently. He could feel her tension. "The wedding will be what Piper wants," Bastian stated, his voice brooking no argument. "If she wants feathers, we will have feathers. If she wants silence, we will have silence." "I want everyone to survive the night," Piper muttered into her wine glass. Suddenly, the waiter approached the table with a new bottle of wine. As he leaned over to pour for Bastian, he slipped. The bottle shattered on the table. Red wine exploded everywhere, soaking Beatrice's pristine white coat. "You clumsy fool!" Beatrice roared. She stood up so fast her chair fell over. Her eyes flashed violet. A low, guttural growl ripped from her throat, loud enough that the entire restaurant went silent. Robert and Linda froze. Thomas dropped his fork. Beatrice looked ready to lunge at the terrified waiter. Her teeth seemed to look sharper in the candlelight. "Beatrice," Piper yelled, slamming her hand on the table. It was the site manager voice, the voice she used to order crane operators around. Beatrice froze, looking at Piper. "Sit down," Piper commanded. "It was an accident, it's just wine. Bastian will buy you a new coat. Sit down." The tension in the room was suffocating. Thomas was staring at Beatrice with his mouth open. Did she just growl? Thomas whispered to Patricia. "Like a Doberman?" "She's British," Robert explained confidently to the table. "They get very angry about wine. It's a cultural thing." Beatrice stared at Piper. The human had dared to command an elder, but the human had also diffused the situation before Beatrice revealed her nature to the entire restaurant. Slowly, Beatrice sat down. She picked up her napkin and dabbed at the stain. "The wine is corked anyway," Beatrice muttered. Bastian looked at Piper with pure adoration. She had just command-healed an elder. "So," Linda clapped her hands, "who wants dessert?" Chapter 7. The Investigation. Thomas Delaney was annoying, loud and dramatic, but he wasn't stupid. He was a top-tier corporate lawyer who sniffed out lies for a living, and his sister was lying. Piper was sitting in her office at the landscaping firm, trying to focus on the floral arrangements for the aisle, when Thomas walked in. He shut the door, locked it, and pulled down the blinds. "Okay," Thomas said, spinning a chair around and sitting on it backward like a cop in a cheesy movie. "Spill it?" Piper didn't look up from her tablet. "Spill what? The hydrangeas? They're imported?" "Not the flowers, Piper. The fiancé and his Aunt Beatrice." Thomas leaned forward. His eyes narrowed. "I did a background check on Bastien Mercier. On paper, he's clean. Too clean. He owns half the city, but there are no photos of him before 5 years ago. And Beatrice?" She growled at a waiter. A literal, guttural animal growl. And then she ate a steak that was basically still mooing. Piper sighed, putting the tablet down. "She's British, Thomas. They're eccentric. And Bastian is private." "Private?" Thomas laughed without humor. "Piper, when the waiter dropped that bottle, Bastian didn't jump. He moved. He moved faster than I could blink. 1 second he was sitting, the next he was halfway across the table shielding you. That's not private. That's military or superhuman." Thomas lowered his voice. "Is he in the mob? Is that why you have enforcers at the door? Is he a hitman? Because if he is, I need to know so I can structure your prenup differently." Piper rubbed her temples. The truth was so much weirder than the mob. "He is not in the mob, Thomas. He's in security. High-level security. That's why he's intense. And the cat?" Thomas pressed. "Swish hates everyone. Swish hates me, and I bring him treats. But that cat treats Bastion like he's a god. Animals know things." "Piper, you're reading too much into it." Piper stood up. "We have a venue walkthrough at the Botanical Gardens in an hour. Are you coming, or are you going to keep interrogating me?" Thomas stood up, straightening his suit. He looked at her with genuine worry. "I'm coming, but I'm watching him, Piper. If he's dangerous, I don't care if he can snap me like a twig. I'm taking him down." Piper's heart squeezed. Thomas was annoying, but he was the best brother in the world, and she was about to give him a heart attack. Chapter 8. The Glass House. The Chicago Botanical Gardens had rented out their largest conservatory for the wedding ceremony. It was a massive cathedral of glass and steel, filled with exotic ferns and towering palms. It was warm, humid, and perfect. Bastion met them there. He looked tense. His eyes were scanning the perimeter of the gardens, tracking movement that Piper couldn't see. "The glass is thick," Bastion noted, tapping a pane. "Bulletproof?" "It's a greenhouse, Bastion, not a bunker," Piper said, linking her arm through his to calm him down. "Relax, Beatrice isn't here." "Beatrice is the least of our problems," Bastion murmured, kissing the top of her head. "My scouts found fresh scent markers near the river. Rogues." "Rogues?" Thomas asked, popping up from behind a fern holding a clipboard. "Is that a band?" "Are we hiring a band called the Rogues?" Bastion stiffened. "Thomas, I didn't see you." "I'm stealthy," Thomas said, adjusting his glasses. "So Bastion, security. Piper tells me you're a bodyguard type. Who did you guard? The president? Beyoncé?" "Something like that," Bastion deflected. They walked deeper into the conservatory. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and damp earth. Suddenly, Bastion stopped. He grabbed Piper's arm, pulling her behind him. "Stay back," he commanded, his voice changing, dropping into that alpha rumble. "What? It's just a gardener," Thomas said, pointing to a man standing by a large ficus tree. The man turned around. He wasn't a gardener. He was wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit, and his eyes were yellow, not contact lens yellow, animal yellow. "Hello, Mercier," the man sneered. He had a scar running down his jaw. "Nice venue, lots of glass, nowhere to hide." "Gavin," Bastion growled. The sound wasn't human. It vibrated in Piper's chest. "You are trespassing. This event is private." "Private?" Gavin laughed. "It's a public garden, Mercier. And I hear your claim to the city is weak. You're marrying a pet." He looked at Piper with hungry, predatory eyes. Thomas stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "Hey, pal, watch your mouth. That's my sister you're talking to. Who do you think you are?" Gavin looked at Thomas and laughed. "And here's the spare. Lunch." Gavin whistled. From behind the ferns, 4 other men emerged. They didn't look like catering staff. They looked like predators. They moved with a loping, hunched gait. "Bastion," Piper whispered, terrified. "There are too many." "Get behind me," Bastion ordered. He began to unbutton his cuffs. "Thomas, take Piper. Run to the exit. Now." "I'm not leaving you to fight 5 guys," Thomas yelled, grabbing a heavy metal candlestick from a display table. "I did Krav Maga for 2 weeks. Let's get him." "Thomas, you idiot." "Run!" Piper screamed, but it was too late. Gavin lunged. Chapter 9. The Reveal. The fight was fast and brutal. Gavin didn't fight like a man. He moved with supernatural speed, leaping over a bench to tackle Bastion. Bastion caught him in mid-air. He slammed Gavin onto the stone path with enough force to crack the pavers. "Thomas, go!" Bastion roared, throwing another attacker into a palm tree. Thomas stood frozen, clutching his candlestick. His brain couldn't process what he was seeing. These men were moving too fast. They were jumping too high. One of the rogues circled around and lunged for Piper. "No!" Thomas yelled, swinging his candlestick. He hit the rogue in the shoulder. It was like hitting a brick wall. The rogue barely flinched. He backhanded Thomas, sending him flying into a bed of tulips. Thomas groaned, his glasses flying off. "Thomas!" Piper screamed. The rogue grabbed Piper by the hair, dragging her back. "I got the bitch!" Bastian turned. He saw Thomas down. He saw Piper in the grip of the enemy. His control snapped. "Mine!" Bastian roared. He didn't bother to undress. He didn't bother to hide it. Right there, in the middle of the botanical gardens, Bastien Mercier exploded. Thomas, squinting without his glasses, watched in horror. Bastien's back arched, his suit jacket shredded as massive muscles erupted underneath. Bones cracked with the sound of gunshots, his face elongated, his nose pushing out into a muzzle. In 3 seconds, the handsome French billionaire was gone. Standing in his place was a 7-foot-tall midnight black wolf with burning golden eyes. "Holy mother of—" Thomas whispered. The wolf roared, a sound that shattered the nearest glass pane. He launched himself across the garden. He hit the rogue holding Piper like a freight train, jaws snapping around the man's arm. The rogue screamed and dropped Piper. The wolf tossed the man 10 feet into a fountain. The other rogues froze. They were looking at the Alpha King in his full feral form. They scrambled, turning tail and running for the exits. The wolf stood over Piper, chest heaving, teeth bared, dripping saliva and blood. He looked terrifying, a monster from a nightmare. Piper wasn't scared. She reached up and touched his snout. "Good boy." The wolf huffed, nudging her cheek to check for injuries. Then a thud. Piper and the wolf turned. Thomas was standing up. He had found his glasses. He put them on. He stared at the giant wolf. He stared at his shredded suit. He stared at Piper, petting the monster. "He's a dog," Thomas whispered, his face draining of all color. "You're marrying a dog." "Wolf," Piper corrected gently. "He's a werewolf, Thomas." Thomas looked at Bastian. Bastian looked at Thomas and let out a low, awkward woof. Thomas's eyes rolled back in his head. His knees buckled. He fainted, collapsing face first into the tulips with a soft thump. The wolf looked at Piper. "Well," Piper sighed, stroking Bastian's fur. "At least he didn't scream." Chapter 10. The getaway driver. Waking up Thomas was not a graceful process. Piper slapped his cheeks. "Thomas, wake up. We have to go before the actual security guards show up and ask why there is a naked billionaire in the tulips." Thomas groaned, his eyes fluttering open. He looked up at the glass ceiling of the conservatory. "I had the craziest dream," he mumbled, adjusting his crooked glasses. "We were at the venue, and Bastian turned into a giant dog, like a Clifford-sized dog, and he ate a guy." "It wasn't a dream," a deep, gravelly voice said from the shadows behind a large fern. Thomas sat up bolt upright. He looked toward the voice. Bastian stepped out. He had shifted back to human form. He was currently wearing a spare tablecloth, ivory linen, wrapped around his waist like a toga. He was covered in sweat, dirt, and a little bit of rogue blood. He looked like a Greek god who had just survived a bar fight. "You're naked," Thomas squeaked. "My clothes did not survive the shift," Bastian stated with dignity. "We need to leave. Now." "He's a werewolf," Thomas whispered to Piper, pointing a shaking finger at Bastian. "He's Teen Wolf, Twilight, Underworld. He's a thing." "He's my fiancé," Piper said, grabbing Thomas's arm and hauling him to his feet. "And right now he's a felony waiting to happen. Move." They sprinted to the parking lot. Piper took the keys to her yellow Jeep. Bastian squeezed into the back seat, still clutching his tablecloth. Thomas sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, hyperventilating. Piper peeled out of the botanical gardens just as sirens wailed in the distance. The car ride was silent for exactly 3 minutes. Then Thomas turned around in his seat to look at Bastian. "So," Thomas said, his voice high-pitched, "does this happen every time you get angry, like the Hulk? If we argue about the catering budget, are you going to eat me?" "I do not eat family," Bastian said, leaning his head back against the seat, looking exhausted. "And I have control. Usually, those men, they touched Piper." "Right," Thomas swallowed. "They touched Piper. You went, poof, wolf, big teeth, got it." Thomas turned back to face the road. He was quiet for another 10 seconds. "Do you have a tail?" "Thomas!" Piper yelled, swerving slightly. "I need to know, Piper. I'm planning a wedding for a canine. Do I need to buy him a chew toy instead of a ring? Does he have fleas? These are valid questions." Bastian let out a low growl from the back seat. It wasn't a human sound. It was the sound of a large predator vibrating against the leather seats. Thomas faced forward instantly. "Okay, no tail questions. Copy that." Chapter 11, The PowerPoint Presentation. Back at the penthouse, the interrogation continued. Bastian had showered and put on clothes, thank God. He sat on the sofa, looking human and composed, though his eyes were still flashing gold occasionally. Piper sat next to him, holding his hand. Thomas paced the room. He had poured himself a very large whiskey. "Okay," Thomas said, gesturing with his glass. "Let's review the data. You are a werewolf. You are the king of werewolves. Your Aunt Beatrice is presumably also a werewolf, which explains why she eats her steak raw and hates me." "She hates everyone," Bastian corrected. "And the cat?" Thomas pointed at Swish, who was asleep on his usual spot, Bastian's lap. "The cat knew, didn't he?" "Swish has excellent instincts," Bastian said, stroking the orange fur. "Unbelievable!" Thomas threw his hands up. "The cat knew before the brother. I'm lower on the totem pole than a feline who licks his own butt." Thomas sat down on the coffee table, facing them. He looked at Bastian with intense curiosity. "Okay, rapid-fire round?" "Answer honestly," Bastian sighed. "Proceed." "Can you fetch?" "No." "If I throw a ball, will you want to fetch it?" "I will want to throw you off the balcony." Thomas nodded. "Fair. How about the moon? Do you howl at it, or is that a stereotype?" "We call to the moon," Bastian admitted. "It is a compulsion. On the full moon, we run, we hunt." "You hunt?" Thomas paled. "Hunt what? Hikers? Postmen?" "Deer," Piper interjected. "They have a private estate upstate. It's a preserve. No postmen are harmed." Thomas took a long sip of whiskey. "Okay, last question. The fleas. Do you have them?" Bastian stood up slowly. He leaned over Thomas, bracing his hands on his knees so they were eye to level. "I am a billionaire, Thomas. I have a skincare regimen that costs more than your car. I do not have fleas." Thomas stared at him. Then a slow grin spread across his face. "This is awesome," Thomas whispered. "My brother-in-law is a superhero. We are going to destroy the wedding industry. Do you know how much money we can save on security? You are the security." Piper groaned. "Thomas, this isn't cool. It's dangerous. Those men at the garden, they were trying to kill us." The mood in the room shifted instantly. Thomas's grin vanished. He looked at the bruises forming on Piper's arm where the rogue had grabbed her. "Right," Thomas said, his voice dropping, becoming the serious lawyer again. "The guys with the yellow eyes. Who were they?" Chapter 12, The War Council. "They are rogues," Bastian explained, his face hardening. "Wolves who have been exiled from their packs for crimes, murder, madness. They have banded together under a leader named Gavin." "And they want you?" Thomas asked. "They want my territory," Bastian said. "And to get it, they think they can weaken me by targeting my vulnerabilities." He squeezed Piper's hand. "Me," Piper said softly. "They think because I'm human, I'm a weakness." Thomas stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. He was quiet for a long time. When he turned back, he didn't look like the goofy brother anymore. He looked like the shark who won million-dollar lawsuits. "Okay," Thomas said, "so we have a turf war, and they targeted Piper." He walked over to the desk and grabbed a notepad. "I'm in," Thomas announced. "In?" Piper blinked. "In where?" "You're going back to your condo and locking the door." "No." Thomas shook his head. "You kept this secret to protect me. But it didn't work. I'm involved now. And frankly, Piper, you're good at building stuff, and Bastian is good at punching stuff, but you guys are terrible at strategy." Thomas clicked his pen. "Bastian, you can't kill them all in public. It draws too much attention. You need to trap them, legally or physically." "I prefer physically," Bastian grumbled. "We need to bait them," Thomas continued, writing furiously. They attacked at the venue because they knew you'd be there. They are watching us, so let's give them a show. What kind of show? Piper asked nervously. The wedding, Thomas said, looking up with a dangerous glint in his eyes. We don't cancel. We make it bigger. We make it the loudest, most public event of the year. We invite the press. We invite the mayor. We make it impossible for them to attack without exposing themselves to the world. And when they try to infiltrate, Bastian asked. Then, Thomas pointed his pen at Bastian, you take them down, quietly, in the back, while I keep the guests distracted with the chocolate fountain. Bastian looked at Thomas. He looked at the notepad. A slow smile spread across his face. You have a ruthless mind, Thomas, Bastian said approvingly. Perhaps there is wolf blood in you after all. Nope, Thomas tapped his temple. Just lawyer blood. It's much more toxic. Suddenly, the elevator chimed. Elder Beatrice stepped out. She looked at Thomas, then at Bastian, then at the notepad. I smell fear, Beatrice announced, and cheap whiskey. It's a single malt. Beatrice, Thomas yelled, and pull up a chair. We're plotting a trap. And since you're the scary one, I need you to handle the guest list. Beatrice blinked. She looked at Bastian. Did the human just give me an order? He did, Bastian smirked, and it was a good one. Chapter 13. Hard hats and high stakes. The next day, Piper stood in the mud of the Industrial District warehouse again. This time, however, she had an entourage. I don't see why I have to wear the neon vest, Thomas complained, adjusting his hard hat. It clashes with my complexion. You wear the vest so the excavators don't run you over, Piper said, unrolling a massive blueprint on a portable table. And so the wolves know you're not a snack. Thomas zipped up the vest immediately. The situation was critical. Beatrice, standing nearby in a new, even more expensive coat, had informed them that the sinking foundation was freezing the pack's assets. If this warehouse collapsed, the council would freeze Bastian's accounts for mismanagement, effectively bankrupting the wedding and the war effort. The sabotage rig was clever, Piper explained to the crew of burly construction workers, all wolves. They weakened the north piling to pull the building toward the river, but we can use that. Use it? Beatrice asked, stepping over a puddle. Counterbalance, Piper pointed to the drawing. We don't fight the slide, we redirect it. We inject expanding polymer resin under the south slab to lift it, then we use rapid-set carbon fiber strapping to lock the north wall to the bedrock anchors. It's like giving the building a pair of high heels to stand on. It stabilizes the structure instantly. The foreman, a gruff wolf named Marcus, looked skeptical. Resin? We usually just pour more concrete. Concrete is heavy, Marcus, Piper said sharply. If you pour concrete on mud, it sinks faster. Do you want to fix the building or bury it? Marcus looked at Beatrice. Beatrice nodded. Listen to the human, Beatrice commanded. She speaks the language of stone. All right, Piper clapped her hands. Thomas, you're on clipboard duty. Track the resin levels. Marcus, fire up the injectors. Let's save this money pit. As the crew scrambled to work, Piper felt a shiver down her spine. It wasn't the cold wind off the river. It was that feeling of being watched again. She looked up at the catwalks of the shadowy warehouse. Nothing. Bastian is patrolling the perimeter, Thomas whispered, noticing her look. He's got enforcers everywhere. We're safe. I hope so, Piper muttered, because if this resin tank explodes, we're all going to be statues. Chapter 14. The Trap. 2 hours later, the sun had set. The warehouse was lit by portable floodlights, casting long, eerie shadows. The resin injection was working. The laser levels showed the building was stabilizing. Piper was down in the main pit, checking the pressure gauges on the helical piers. Pressure holding at 3,000 psi, she yelled up to Thomas. Copy that, Thomas yelled back, giving a thumbs up from the safety of the main floor. Suddenly, the floodlights cut out. The warehouse plunged into total darkness. The hum of the generators died. Power failure? Thomas's voice echoed, sounding nervous. Marcus? Did you kick the plug? Silence. Then a scream. Not from Thomas, but from one of the wolf crew members on the roof. Thud. A body hit the floor nearby. Bastian! Piper reached for her radio. Static. They were being jammed. "Piper!" Thomas screamed. "Get out of the pit! They're inside!" Yellow eyes appeared in the darkness above her. Not one pair, three. The rogues had bypassed the perimeter. They weren't here to destroy the building. They were here to finish the job Gavin started. "There she is!" a raspy voice hissed from the catwalk. "The architect!" A rogue dropped from the ceiling, landing in the mud 5 feet from Piper. He shifted partially, claws extended, teeth bared. Piper didn't have a gun. She didn't have claws. She had a wrench and a very dangerous piece of construction equipment. "Don't come closer," Piper warned, her voice shaking, but her hand steady on the release valve of the resin tank. "Or what?" the rogue sneered, stepping forward. "You'll hit me with a ruler." "No," Piper said. "I'll renovate you." She cranked the valve of the high-pressure resin hose. Hiss! A jet of expanding polymer foam, the stuff used to lift concrete slabs, shot out of the nozzle at 800 psi. It hit the rogue square in the chest. The rogue roared, trying to claw it off, but the foam expanded instantly, hardening within seconds. It glued his arms to his chest. It glued his legs together. The force knocked him backward against the foundation wall, where the foam cemented him to the concrete. "It's quickset," Piper noted dryly. "You have about 3 seconds before you're a permanent fixture." 2 more rogues dropped down. They looked at their trapped comrade, then at Piper. They snarled and lunged. Piper scrambled up the muddy embankment. She grabbed a lever on the wall, the release for the gravel chute she had rigged earlier to backfill the hole. "Thomas! Now!" she screamed. Thomas, up on the control deck, didn't hesitate. He slammed his fist onto the manual override button. Crash! 2 tons of crushed gravel poured from the overhead hopper. It rained down on the pit, burying the 2 rogues up to their necks in stone before they could reach her. Piper stood panting, covered in mud, holding her wrench like a weapon. "Physics," she whispered. "It's a bitch." Chapter 15. Feral. The warehouse doors were ripped off their hinges. It wasn't the wind. Bastien Mercier tore into the building. He was in human form, but only barely. His eyes were blazing suns of golden rage. His canines were fully extended. He was covered in blood, none of it his own. "Piper!" His roar shook the dust from the rafters. He had felt her fear through the bond. He had heard the scream. He thought he was too late. He saw the darkness. He smelled the rogue scent. His mind snapped. "I'm here!" Piper yelled, waving her flashlight from the bottom of the pit. "I'm okay! Bastien, I'm okay!" Bastien didn't stop moving. He blurred, moving with supernatural speed up the stairs. He reached her, grabbing her shoulders, his claws digging into her jacket. He was scanning her frantically, checking for blood, for breaks, for bites. "Did they touch you?" he snarled, his voice a distorted, demonic vibration. "Did they draw blood?" "No," Piper said, putting her hands on his face. He was trembling violently. The wolf was trying to take over, trying to kill everything in the room to ensure safety. "Bastien, look at me! Look at me!" "I will kill them," he gasped, his eyes darting to the pit where the rogues were trapped in foam and gravel. "I will tear them apart piece by piece." He moved to jump over the railing to finish them. "Stop," Piper ordered. "Sit." Bastien froze. The command cut through the feral haze. He looked at her, his chest heaving. "They are trapped," Piper said calmly. "They can't move. We need them alive. We need to know where Gavin is. If you kill them now, we lose the intel." Bastien fought it. Every instinct screamed destroy. But the architect was speaking logic. "They hunted you," he whispered, a tear of pure rage leaking from his eye. "I failed." "You didn't fail," Piper said softly. She pulled his head down and pressed her forehead against his. "I handled it. I'm the queen, remember? I protect my territory too." From the shadows near the entrance, Elder Beatrice stepped forward. She stepped over the shattered door, looking down into the pit at the rogue cemented to the wall like a modern art masterpiece. She looked up at Piper. There was no sneer, no judgment. "You trapped 3 fully shifted wolves," Beatrice observed coolly, "using foam and rocks. And a really big wrench," Thomas added, popping up from behind a crate, holding a tire iron. "I was back up." Beatrice looked at Piper. For the first time, she bowed her head, a slight, respectful tilt. "The structure is stable," Beatrice said. "And the enemies are neutralized. You pass the audit, Piper Delaney." Bastian wrapped his arms around Piper, burying his face in her neck, breathing in her scent to ground himself. "She passes," Bastian growled into her hair. "Now, we interrogate." Chapter 16. Good cop, bad cop, lawyer. The interrogation room was actually the walk-in freezer of the warehouse, which had been hastily converted into a holding cell. The rogue Piper had trapped in foam, whose name turned out to be Steve, was currently chipped out of the floor and zip-tied to a chair. Bastian paced in front of him. He had removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. The tattoos on his forearms seemed to move as his muscles flexed. He looked terrifying. "Where is Gavin?" Bastian asked. His voice was calm, which was infinitely scarier than shouting. "If you do not tell me, I will let the wolf take over, and he is very hungry." Steve the Rogue sneered. "I'm not talking. You can't kill me. The council is watching. It's against the treaty to execute prisoners without a trial." Bastian leaned in, his eyes flashing gold. "I am the king. I am the treaty." "Actually," a voice interrupted from the door. "Technically, under Article 4, Section C of the Supernatural Bylaws, which I just skimmed on your iPad, he's right. Summary execution is a PR nightmare." Thomas walked in. He was holding a Starbucks cup and a briefcase. Steve looked confused. "Who is this? The accountant?" "I," Thomas said, setting his briefcase on a frozen crate of beef, "am Thomas Delaney, Esker's senior partner at Delaney and Associates, and I represent the prosecution." "Prosecution?" Steve blinked. "This is a pack war, not small claims court." "It's both," Thomas corrected. "See, Steve, while Bastian here wants to rip your throat out, which is messy, I want to sue you for trespassing, attempted kidnapping, destruction of private property, and emotional distress caused to my sister." Thomas pulled a stack of papers out of his briefcase. "I've already filed emergency injunctions against your assets, Steve. Your bank accounts? Frozen pending investigation for fraud. Your landlord? I just emailed him photos of the illegal subletting you've been doing. And I flagged your credit cards as stolen. You are currently financially radioactive." Steve looked horrified. "You can't do that." "I just did," Thomas smirked. "Bastian will kill your body. I will kill your life. You'll survive, but you'll be homeless, broke, and unable to get a loan for a toaster." Bastian stepped back, crossing his arms, looking impressed. "He is vicious." "So," Thomas leaned in, sipping his latte, "here is the plea deal. You tell us Gavin's plan for the wedding. In exchange, I unfreeze your assets, and Bastian lets you run away to Canada. You have 10 seconds. Steve looked at the Alpha King's claws. Then he looked at the lawyer's smug grin. "The vows?" Steve broke. "Gavin is hitting the vows." "Why the vows?" Bastian growled. "Because," Steve stammered, "it's the blood moon eclipse. The totality severs the connection to the wolf spirit for everyone, but specifically the king. During the binding ritual, you have to lower your mental shields to accept the mate. Combined with the eclipse, you'll be completely mortal for about 5 minutes. That's when Gavin plans to strike." Bastian went still. Thomas clicked his pen. "See? Was that so hard? Canada is nice this time of year, Steve. Pack a sweater." Chapter 17. Weaponized Tool. With the intel secured, the wedding planning shifted from romantic celebration to tactical operation. Piper stood on the pedestal at Vera's bridal, staring at herself in the mirror. The dress was magnificent, a sleek modern silhouette with a dramatic train and long lace sleeves. It was elegant, regal, and cost more than Piper's college tuition. "It fits perfectly," Beatrice said. The elder was sitting on a velvet couch, sipping champagne. Surprisingly, Beatrice had insisted on coming. Even more surprisingly, she had excellent taste. "It's tight," Piper noted, twisting to see the back. "Can I run in it?" "You will not need to run," Beatrice said firmly. "We have tripled the perimeter guard and—" Beatrice stood up and walked over to Piper. She reached into her massive designer tote bag and pulled out a shimmering silver object. It was a dagger, thin, razor sharp, with a hilt encrusted in sapphires that matched Piper's engagement ring. "This Beatrice whispered, sliding the dagger into a hidden sheath sewn into the folds of the skirt. Is for the vows. Piper touched the hidden pocket. You want me to carry a weapon down the aisle? A queen does not rely solely on her king, Beatrice said, her violet eyes serious. Gavin thinks you are a weakness because you are human. He thinks you will stand there and scream while Bastion is vulnerable. Show him he is wrong. Piper looked at herself in the mirror. The dress didn't just look like a bridal gown anymore. It looked like armor. Okay, Piper nodded, a fierce look settling in her eyes. I'll wear the dagger, but if I trip and stab the priest, that's on you. Just then, the dressing room curtain twitched. Is it safe? Bastion's voice called out from the other side. I brought lunch. I was told seeing the dress is bad luck, so I am staring at the floor. Piper smiled. Come in, wolf boy, but keep your eyes closed. Bastion slipped in, holding a bag of burgers. He kept his eyes squeezed shut, looking ridiculous. I smell silk and danger, he noted. Beatrice just armed me, Piper said, taking a burger. I'm now a lethal bride. Bastion opened his eyes, just a slit, looking at her face, careful not to look down at the dress. You were always lethal, ma chérie, he murmured, reaching out to blindly stroke her cheek. Gavin is walking into a trap. He thinks he is hunting sheep. He does not realize he is walking into a den of lions. And a lawyer, Piper added, taking a bite of the burger. Don't forget the lawyer. Chapter 18. The Bachelor Party. The night before the wedding, Thomas decided to throw the ultimate bachelor party. Since Bastion couldn't go to a normal strip club, his hearing was too sensitive for the loud music, and he found the smell of cheap perfume offensive. Thomas rented out a private axe-throwing bar in the trendy West Loop. The guest list was eclectic. Thomas, man of honor, Robert, father of the bride, Bastion, groom king. Marcus, construction wolf foreman. 6 terrifying enforcers. Swish. The cat came in a carrier because Robert refused to leave him alone at the hotel. All right, boys, Thomas shouted, standing on a table with a beer. Rules are simple. We drink, we throw axes, we do not shift and eat the furniture. The enforcers grunted, chugging pitchers of beer like it was water. Bastion sat in a leather booth, looking bored but amused. He was sipping a very expensive scotch. Your brother has energy, Marcus grumbled, sitting next to Bastion. He tried to get me to do a shot ski with your father. He is celebrating, Bastion said. Let him have his fun. So Bastion. Robert stumbled over, holding an axe. I've been meaning to ask. The grandkids. Are they gonna come out as puppies? Or babies? Do I need to buy a kennel or a crib? Bastion choked on his scotch. Robert, Bastion coughed. That is biology we have not yet discussed. But I assure you, they will be babies. Mostly. Mostly? Robert laughed, slapping Bastion on the back. I love this guy. Hey, Thomas, watch this. Robert threw the axe. It missed the target entirely and embedded itself in the drywall 3 feet to the left. Nailed it! Thomas cheered. The night devolved into chaos. The wolves discovered they were naturally gifted at axe throwing. They started making bets. I bet you $50 I can hit the bullseye blindfolded, Marcus challenged Thomas. You're on, Thomas slurred. Marcus tied a napkin around his eyes. He tilted his head, listening to the hum of the air conditioning vent located directly above the target to orient himself. He threw the axe. Thunk, perfect bullseye. That's cheating, Thomas yelled. You used your wolf radar. Skill issue, Marcus shrugged. By 2 a.m., the bar was a mess of wood chips and empty kegs. The wolves were howling along to Don't Stop Believin' on the jukebox. Robert was asleep in a booth with Swish curled up on his chest. Thomas sat next to Bastion. He was sobering up, looking at his future brother-in-law. Hey, Thomas said quietly. Tomorrow, the vows. I know, Bastion said, his gaze sharpening. You're going to be mortal, Thomas noted. For 5 minutes. That's a long time for a guy who has a lot of enemies. It is necessary, Bastion said. To share my life with Piper, I must bind my soul to hers. It requires balance. Well, Thomas reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a Glock 19. Bastion raised an eyebrow. Thomas? I got a permit, Thomas said, checking the safety, and I've been practicing at the range. You protect Piper every day. Tomorrow, for those 5 minutes, I got your back. Bastian looked at the gun, then at the scrawny, brave lawyer holding it. A fierce respect swelled in his chest. Thank you, brother, Bastian said, clinking his glass against Thomas's gun. We will make a good pack. Yeah, Thomas grinned. Just don't tell Mom I have a piece. She'll kill me. Chapter 19. Something borrowed, something blue, something sharp. The bridal suite at the Botanical Gardens was a flurry of hairspray, champagne, and panic. Linda Delaney was crying. She had been crying since 9 a.m. You look like a princess, Linda sobbed, dabbing at her mascara with a tissue. My baby girl, getting married to a handsome, wealthy security consultant. It's the American dream. Piper stood on the podium while a seamstress made final adjustments to the train. She felt less like a princess and more like a soldier suiting up for battle. Underneath the layers of silken tulle, the sapphire-encrusted dagger Beatrice had given her was strapped securely to her thigh. Thanks, Mom, Piper smiled, checking the mirror. She looked calm, but her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The door opened, and Elder Beatrice swept in. She was wearing a floor-length gown of liquid silver that looked like armor. Out, Beatrice commanded the seamstress and the makeup artist. I need a moment with the bride. Linda sniffled. Oh, a family moment. That's sweet. I'll go check on your father. He's trying to teach the string quartet how to play Sweet Caroline. Linda bustled out, leaving Piper alone with the wolf elder. Beatrice didn't waste time on pleasantries. She locked the door and turned to Piper. The perimeter is secure, Beatrice reported, her voice low. Marcus and his team are stationed in the trees. The enforcers are disguised as catering staff, but the eclipse begins in 20 minutes. The moment the moon turns red, Bastian's power will vanish. You will have a 5-minute window where he is just a man. 5 minutes, Piper repeated, taking a deep breath. We can hold them for 5 minutes. Beatrice walked over and adjusted Piper's veil. Her cold, sharp features softened slightly. You are human, Beatrice said. You are fragile, but you have the mind of a builder. Tonight, do not try to be a wolf. Be the architect. If they attack, you change the environment. You control the ground. I know, Piper said, touching the hidden pocket in her dress. I'm ready. Beatrice nodded. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small, vintage flask. Drink, Beatrice ordered. It is scotch. Aged 30 years. It will steady your hands. Piper took a swig. It burned pleasantly. Thanks, Aunt Beatrice. Do not call me Aunt, Beatrice snapped, taking the flask back. But you look adequate. For a human. It was the highest compliment Piper was ever going to get. Chapter 20. The Long Walk. The conservatory was transformed. Thousands of white orchids hung from the glass ceiling, and candles lined the stone aisle, casting a warm, flickering glow. The guests were a bizarre mix. On the left side, the Delaney family and friends, accountants, dentists, and neighbors from Florida wearing tropical prints. On the right side, the pack. Men and women in dark, impeccably tailored suits, sitting perfectly still, staring straight ahead with predatory intensity. Thomas stood at the entrance, offering his arm to Piper. He looked pale. He kept patting the left side of his suit jacket where the Glock 19 was concealed. You okay? Piper whispered, gripping his arm. Peachy, Thomas squeaked. I'm just walking my sister down the aisle to marry a werewolf while hoping our trap actually works. If Gavin doesn't show up, I rented these security guards for nothing. At least the cat isn't here. He refused to get in the carrier, so he's guarding the hotel room. Just a normal Saturday. Good, Piper said. One less diva to worry about. Just don't shoot the priest. No promises, Thomas warned. Father O'Malley moves fast. At least the cat isn't here. He refused to get in the carrier, so he's guarding the hotel room. Good, Piper said. One less diva to worry about. Normal Saturday. The music started. Not Sweet Caroline, thank God, but a haunting, beautiful cello melody. They stepped out. Every head turned. Piper didn't look at the guests. She looked at the end of the aisle. Bastion stood at the altar. He took her breath away. He was wearing a tuxedo of midnight blue velvet. His hair was pushed back, revealing the sharp angles of his face. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his posture rigid. But his eyes were locked on her, burning with a golden intensity that made the candlelight seem dim. He wasn't looking at her like a groom. He was looking at her like she was the only gravity in the universe. As she got closer, she saw the tension in his jaw. He was scanning the shadows, his ears twitching slightly. He was the king guarding his territory, even at his own wedding. Thomas deposited her at the altar. He leaned in to Bastion. "Sector 4 is clear," Thomas whispered. "And you look good. Nice velvet." "Thank you, Thomas," Bastion murmured. "Nice bulge." "Is that the gun, or are you just happy to see me?" Thomas choked back a laugh and stepped aside to take his place as man of honor. Piper took Bastion's hands. They were warm and strong. "You look," Bastion started, his voice rough. "Dangerous." "That's the look I was going for," Piper smiled. The priest, a nervous older man named Father O'Malley, cleared his throat. He looked at Bastion, then at the very large, scary guests in the front row. "Dearly beloved," the priest began, his voice wavering slightly, "we are gathered here today." Bastion suddenly stiffened. A low growl vibrated in his chest, audible only to Piper and the priest. Father O'Malley jumped. Is there a problem?" "Skip the sermon," Bastion commanded softly. "Get to the vows. The moon is turning." Chapter 21. The eclipse above the glass ceiling of the conservatory. The full white moon was beginning to dim. A shadow crept across its face, turning the light from silver to a rusty blood red. The blood moon eclipse. A ripple of unease went through the right side of the aisle. The wolves shifted in their seats. The connection to the moon was being severed. Piper felt Bastion's hands tremble. "It is happening," he whispered. The gold in his eyes began to fade. The supernatural brightness dimmed, replaced by a warm, human whiskey brown. The heat radiating from his skin cooled. The overpowering aura of the Alpha King receded, leaving just a man. A mortal man. "Do it now," Bastion ordered the priest. "The binding." Father O'Malley fumbled with a silk cord. "Do you, Bastion Mercier, take this woman?" "Yes." Bastion cut him off. "I take her. I claim her. My blood is hers." He grabbed a small ceremonial knife from the altar table. Without hesitating, he sliced his palm. He held his hand out. Piper took the knife. She sliced her own palm. She didn't flinch. They clasped hands, mixing the blood. "I, Piper Delaney," she said, her voice steady in the silent garden. "Take you, Bastion. My blood is yours. Your pack is my pack." A strange sensation washed over her. It wasn't the electric jolt of the bond she was used to. It was quieter, deeper. It felt like an anchor dropping into the ocean floor. Bastion let out a breath, his shoulders slumping slightly. He was completely human now. No super strength, no healing, no claws. "It is done," he whispered, looking at their joined hands. "You are queen." Crash. The sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. High above them, a panel in the conservatory roof exploded inward. Ropes dropped from the steel beams. Dark figures rappelled down, landing on the stone path with heavy thuds. At the same time, the side doors burst open. "Now!" a voice screamed. Gavin stepped out from the shadows of the orchid display. He wasn't shifted. He couldn't shift during the eclipse either, but he was holding an assault rifle. "Kill the king!" Gavin roared. "He's human! End the line!" the wedding guests screamed. Linda grabbed Robert and ducked under the pew. But the right side of the aisle, the pack, didn't scream. They stood up in unison. But without their powers, they were just men in suits against armed mercenaries. Bastion shoved Piper behind him. "Thomas, get her out!" "No!" Piper yelled, grabbing Bastion's arm. "We don't run!" She reached into the folds of her dress and ripped the sapphire dagger free. Thomas pulled the Glock 19 from his jacket. "Nobody shoots the groom on my watch." Gavin raised his rifle, aiming directly at Bastion's chest. Say goodbye, Your Majesty. The totality lasts 5 minutes, plenty of time to bleed you out. Click. The lights in the conservatory went out. Total, pitch blackness. Piper grinned in the dark. Welcome to my building, she whispered. Chapter 22. The Rainforest Protocol. The conservatory was pitch black, save for the chaotic strobing of muzzle flashes from Gavin's rifle. Bang, bang, bang. Bullets shattered the stone altar, sending chips of marble flying. Everyone down! Thomas screamed, diving over the pew to shield Piper's parents. Robert was trying to wield a cello like a baseball bat, and Linda was screaming into a napkin. Piper grabbed Bastian's hand in the dark. Follow me, she whispered. 3 steps left. There's a retaining wall. I cannot see, Bastian hissed, frustration bleeding into his voice. For the first time in years, he was blind in the dark. He was mortal. Piper, get to the exit. No, Piper said, pulling him behind a thick cluster of palms. We don't leave, we irrigate. She reached into the dense foliage. She knew exactly where the manual override panel for the conservatory's climate control was. She had argued with the venue manager about its placement just yesterday. She found the manual bypass piping behind the ferns. She didn't look for a button, the power was out, but for the red iron wheel valve marked emergency flush. Hold your breath, Piper warned. She gripped the cold metal wheel and cranked it hard to the left. Hiss! A deafening hiss filled the massive glass room. High-pressure misting nozzles in the ceiling, designed to water thousands of tropical plants simultaneously, activated at full blast. Thick, cold fog erupted from the rafters, filling the room in seconds. It mixed with the darkness to create a disorienting, suffocating cloud. Cease fire! Gavin yelled from the altar. I can't see a damn thing. The muzzle flashes are reflecting off the mist. The shooting stopped. The rogues were coughing, disoriented by the sudden blast of moisture and noise. Brilliant, Bastian whispered in Piper's ear. He kissed her wet cheek. Now stay here. I'm going to break some legs. Be careful, she gripped his tuxedo jacket. You don't heal right now. I am still Bastien Mercier, he said, his voice cold and hard. I do not need claws to kill a traitor. He vanished into the fog. Piper didn't stay put. She lifted her heavy, wet wedding dress and moved toward the sound of footsteps. She had a dagger, and she knew where the slippery moss patches were. It was time to weed the garden. Chapter 23. The Lawyer with the Glock. Thomas Delaney wiped the condensation off his glasses, but it was useless. He was blind, wet, and holding a loaded gun in a room full of relatives. Stay down, Mom, Thomas whispered, pushing Linda's head lower. Is this part of the show? Robert asked, clutching his cello. Is this immersive theater? No, Dad, it's a hit squad, Thomas hissed. A shape loomed out of the fog, a rogue wearing tactical gear and holding a knife. Stepped over the pew. He spotted Thomas. Well, look at this, the rogue sneered. The spare. He lunged. Thomas didn't think. He didn't use Krav Maga. He just raised the Glock 19, squeezed the trigger, and screamed. Bang, bang, bang. The gun jerked violently in his hand. He fired 3 shots in a blind panic before he realized what he was doing and stopped. The bullets shattered the glass ceiling, but one lucky stray bullet hit the massive hanging clay pot of a giant Boston fern directly above the rogue's head. Crack! The chain snapped. 50 pounds of pottery, soil, and dense fern plummeted down and smashed onto the rogue's head with a sickening thud. The rogue collapsed instantly, buried under a pile of potting soil. Thomas stared at the gun, then at the unconscious man. I meant to do that, Thomas announced to his parents. Tactical environmental takedown. That's my boy, Robert cheered. Nearby, the sounds of a brutal fistfight echoed. Bastian was engaging the enemy. Without his wolf strength, Bastian was relying on pure technique. He ducked a punch from a mercenary, used the man's own momentum to flip him into a stone fountain, and then elbowed another in the throat. But there were too many of them. Gavin emerged from the mist, looking like a demon. He swung the butt of his rifle, catching Bastian in the ribs. Crack! Bastian grunted, doubling over. He was human. Bones broke easily. Gavin kicked him in the chest, sending him sprawling onto the wet stone steps of the altar. Look at you, Gavin laughed, racking the slide of his rifle. The great Alpha King, bleeding like a stuck pig. Gavin aimed the gun at Bastian's head. Any last words? Your Majesty? Yeah, a female voice rang out. Look behind you. Chapter 24. The Return of the King. Gavin spun around, trying to pierce the swirling fog. Piper scrambled off the altar and ran to the side pillar. She knew exactly where she was. She had designed the layout after all. Even in the mist, she knew where the temporary anchor line for the lighting rig was tied off. She held the sapphire-encrusted dagger in a reverse grip. She didn't attack Gavin. She attacked the tension rope secured to the pillar that held the massive crystal chandelier directly above the altar. She slashed the rope. Gavin looked up just in time to dive out of the way. The chandelier crashed onto the spot where he had been standing, exploding into 1,000,000 shards of crystal and glass. The distraction bought Bastion 3 seconds. He swept Gavin's legs, knocking him to the ground. They grappled in the glass shards. Gavin was stronger. He was a large man, and Bastion was injured. Gavin got his hands around Bastion's throat, squeezing. Die, human! Gavin screamed. Bastion gagged, clawing at Gavin's hands. His vision started to spot. He looked at Piper, who was scrambling down from the altar to help him. Then, the light changed. Through the shattered roof panels, the rusty red hue of the eclipse began to slide away. A sliver of brilliant, pure white moonlight cut through the darkness. The 5 minutes were up. The change was instantaneous. 1 second, Bastion was choking, his face purple. The next, a shockwave of power exploded from his body. His eyes snapped open. They weren't brown. They were twin suns of molten gold. Roar! The sound wasn't a scream. It was a sonic boom. Bastion's hand shot up and grabbed Gavin's wrist. With a sickening crunch, he crushed the rogue's bones like dry twigs. Ah! Gavin shrieked, letting go. Bastion stood up. He didn't shift fully. He didn't need to. He was in the hybrid state, human form, but with the strength and speed of the wolf. His canines lengthened, his wounds knit together before Piper's eyes, the bruising on his ribs vanishing. He picked Gavin up by the throat with one hand, lifting the 200-pound man into the air as if he were a rag doll. You wanted the king? Bastion's voice was layered, a dual harmonic of man and beast. Here I am. The mist in the room began to clear. The other rogues, seeing their leader dangling helplessly, froze. Bastion threw Gavin across the room. The rogue leader smashed into a stone pillar and slid down unconscious. Bastion turned to the remaining mercenaries. He tugged at his tuxedo cuffs, the fabric straining tight across his expanded forearms, the jacket seams splitting at the shoulders. Run, Bastion whispered. They didn't need to be told twice. The mercenaries dropped their weapons and scrambled for the exits, terrified of the monster in the tuxedo. Bastion didn't chase them. He turned to Piper. He walked over to her, stepping over the broken glass. He took her face in his hands, his golden eyes scanning her frantically for injuries. Are you whole? He demanded, his voice trembling with adrenaline. Tell me you are whole. I'm fine, Piper breathed, dropping the dagger. I dropped a chandelier on him. Bastion threw his head back and laughed, a wild, joyful sound. He pulled her into a crushing kiss, lifting her off her feet, spinning her around in the center of the wrecked conservatory. That is my queen, he roared. That is my mate. From behind a fern, Thomas stood up, wiping mud off his glasses. He looked at the unconscious bad guys, the shattered chandelier, and his sister kissing the werewolf. Okay, Thomas said, holstering his gun. Best wedding ever. Chapter 25. The NDA wedding. The adrenaline crash was real. The conservatory was silent, save for the dripping of the misting system and the groans of the mercenaries being zip-tied by Bastion's enforcers. Okay, Thomas shouted, clapping his hands. He stood on a pew, muddy, glasses crooked, holding a stack of napkins. Listen up, everyone! That concludes the immersive theater portion of the evening. The guests, Piper's family and friends, slowly peeked out from under the tables. Theater? Aunt Karen asked, clutching her pearls. That man turned into a wolf, Thomas. CGI, Thomas lied smoothly. Holograms, very expensive. Elon Musk stuff. And the guys with the guns, blanks, Hollywood prop guns. We wanted to test your reflexes. Robert Delaney stood up, brushing potting soil off his tuxedo. He stared at the shattered chandelier, then gaped at the unconscious Gavin. "I knew it!" Robert beamed. "I told Linda. That wolf looks too real to be legitimate. Great special effects, Bastian. A little loud, but very modern." Bastian, who had discarded his ruined, blood-soaked jacket and wiped his hands clean with a silk handkerchief, looked at Thomas. "Your brother," Bastian murmured to Piper, "is a pathological liar. I respect him immensely." "He's a lawyer," Piper said, leaning against Bastian, exhausted. "It's the same thing." Thomas hopped down from the pew. He walked over to the guests, pulling a stack of papers from his jacket pocket. "Now, as part of the exclusive experience, we need everyone to sign these non-disclosure agreements. It's for copyright reasons. Can't have you spoiling the show on Instagram." While Thomas bullied the relatives into signing legal documents, Elder Beatrice stepped over the wreckage of the altar. Her silver dress was wet, but she looked immaculate. She stopped in front of Gavin, who was being dragged away by 2 enforcers. "Wait," Beatrice commanded. She looked down at the rogue leader. "You attacked during a sacred rite. You targeted a human, and you were defeated by a sprinkler system and a lawyer with a flower pot." Beatrice let out a short, cold laugh. "Take him to the darkest cell we have," she ordered. "I will interrogate him personally on Monday. I have some aggression to work out." She turned to Piper. "You," Beatrice said, pointing a manicured finger. "Your dress is ruined." "I know," Piper shrugged, looking at the muddy, torn silk. "Good," Beatrice nodded. "A pristine dress means a boring bride. You fought well, architect. The council is satisfied." Chapter 26. Vows in the Ruins. By 10:12 p.m., the police had come and gone. Thomas handled them with the same story about an immersive theater pyrotechnic malfunction involving prop guns. The guests had been bussed to the reception hall for drinks, and the rogues were in custody. The conservatory was empty. Just Piper, Bastian, and Father O'Malley, who was sitting on a bench drinking communion wine straight from the bottle. "Father?" Bastian asked gently. Father O'Malley jumped. "I saw things. I saw a man become a beast. I saw a cat attack a SWAT team member." "It was a metaphor for the duality of man," Thomas whispered to the priest, patting his shoulder. "Just go with it, Padre. Finish the job, and there's a huge donation to the Church Restoration Fund coming your way." Father O'Malley stood up, straightening his vestments. He looked at the wrecked altar, the shattered glass, and the couple standing in the mist. "Right," the priest said shakily. "Where were we?" Piper and Bastian stood amidst the debris. Bastian took Piper's hands. His palms were healed, but hers still had the faint cut from the ceremony. "I don't have a ring," Bastian realized, patting his shredded pocket. "I took it from Thomas before the ceremony. It must have been lost when Gavin threw me across the altar." "I don't need a ring," Piper said, looking up at him. Her hair was a mess, her makeup was running, and she had never felt more beautiful. "I have the scar, and I have the king." Bastian's eyes softened, glowing with a warm, steady gold. "Piper Delaney," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are the chaos in my order. You are the architect of my heart. I promise to protect you, to hunt for you, and to never complain when you bring stray cats into our bed." Piper laughed, tears spilling over. "Bastien Mercier," she replied. "I promise to keep your secrets, to build you a home, and to always have a beware of dogs sign ready. I love you, you giant furry idiot." "By the power vested in me," Father O'Malley rushed, eyeing the shadows nervously, "and by the state of Illinois, I pronounce you wolf and wife. You may kiss the bride. Please hurry." Bastian didn't hurry. He pulled Piper close, wrapping his arms around her ruined dress, and kissed her with a passion that made the destruction around them fade away. Thomas cheered, firing his empty Glock into the air. Click, click. "Mazel tov!" Thomas yelled. Chapter 27. The Morning. After the sun rose over a very quiet penthouse, Piper woke up in her own bed, the only piece of furniture that hadn't been destroyed in the last 6 months. Her body ached, but it was a good ache. She turned over. Bastian was asleep beside her. He was lying on his stomach, arm thrown over his head, and sleeping directly on Bastion's back was Swish. Piper smiled, the Alpha King and the Beta Cat. She slipped out of bed and walked into the living room. It was a disaster of wedding gifts. Half-opened suitcases and leftover cake. Sitting at the kitchen island, drinking coffee, was Beatrice. "Good morning," Beatrice said, not looking up from her tablet. "Your brother is currently negotiating a settlement with the Botanical Gardens for the roof. He is terrifyingly competent. Thomas is good at cleaning up messes." Piper agreed, pouring herself a cup. "Are you leaving?" Beatrice finally looked up. She looked tired, but the harsh lines around her mouth had softened. "The council returns to London today," Beatrice said. "We have concluded the audit." She slid a heavy envelope across the counter. "What is this?" Piper asked. "The deed," Beatrice said, "to the land in the industrial district. The council has transferred ownership to you, personally." Piper's eyes widened. "To me? You fixed the foundation?" Beatrice shrugged. "You saved the asset. It is yours to develop. Consider it a wedding gift from one alpha female to another." Piper stared at the elder. "You called me an alpha. You command a king." Beatrice stood up, buttoning her coat. "You command a lawyer, and you command that demon cat. If that is not an alpha, I do not know what is." Beatrice walked to the elevator. She paused at the doors. "Do not get comfortable, Piper," Beatrice warned, though there was a glint of amusement in her eyes. "Marriage is a battlefield, and raising pups, that is a war." The doors closed. Piper looked at the deed, then she looked at the bedroom door where her husband and cat were sleeping. "War," she whispered, grinning. "Bring it on." Thomas walked in the front door, looking disheveled but triumphant. "Good news," Thomas announced. "The venue isn't suing. I told them the roof collapse was a structural anomaly caused by climate change. Also, Mom and Dad are at the airport. They think Bastion is a magician. We're in the clear." "You're amazing," Piper said. "I know." Thomas grabbed a donut. "Now, about the honeymoon, please tell me you're going somewhere without extradition treaties. I need a vacation from your vacation." "We're going to the cabin," Piper said. "Just us. No phones, no rogues." "And the cat?" Thomas asked. Piper smiled. "Swish is coming. He needs a vacation too. He bit a mercenary." Chapter 28. The cabin in the woods. The cabin was not a cabin. Piper should have known better. When a billionaire Alpha King says, "I have a rustic retreat in the North Woods," he does not mean a log shack with a drafty chimney. Piper pulled her yellow Jeep up the winding, snow-covered driveway. The vehicle was packed to the brim with luggage, groceries, and a very unhappy cat in a carrier. "Bastion!" Piper said, staring out the windshield. "That is not a cabin. That is a Bond villain's lair." The structure rose out of the snowy forest like a shard of obsidian. It was all black timber and floor-to-ceiling glass, cantilevered over a frozen waterfall. It looked sleek, modern, and impregnable. "It is private," Bastion said from the passenger seat. He looked relaxed for the first time in months. He was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, a look that did dangerous things to Piper's heart rate. "No neighbors for miles. No cell service. We are deep in the Wisconsin wilderness. My enforcers are patrolling the outer perimeter 5 miles out. You won't see them, but they are there, inside the wire. It is just us." "Romantic," Piper deadpanned. She parked the Jeep. As soon as the engine cut, the silence of the forest rushed in. It was profound. No sirens, no construction, no Thomas yelling about tablecloths. "Open the carrier," Bastion warned, "before he eats the mesh." Piper unzipped the carrier in the back seat. Swish shot out like a fuzzy orange cannonball. He landed in the snow, paused, shook his paws with a look of absolute disgust, and sprinted for the front door of the house. "He hates nature," Piper noted. "He is a city cat," Bastion agreed, grabbing the bags. "He prefers his birds on a screen." They walked up to the massive front door. Bastion didn't use a key. He placed his hand on a biometric scanner. Beep. "Welcome, Alpha." The door slid open silently. Inside, the house was warm, smelling of cedar and wood smoke. A fire was already crackling in the massive stone hearth, remote-activated obviously. "Thomas packed us a honeymoon survival kit," Piper said, dropping her bag on the sofa and pulling out a box Thomas had shoved into her hands as they left. She opened it. Inside were 2 cans of bear spray, a family-sized box of condoms, a laminated card titled, "What to Do If Bastion Goes Feral, a Lawyer's Guide," a bag of catnip labeled "For Swish" or "Bastion Try It Out." Bastion picked up the laminated card. "Step 1, he read aloud, "throw a stick. Step 2, run. Step 3, sue his estate." Bastion chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "I am going to miss him." "Don't lie," Piper grinned, walking over to him. "I am not lying." Bastion pulled her into his arms. He defended the pack. He is family. Annoying, loud, litigation-obsessed family. But family. He kissed her forehead. "But I am glad he is 300 miles away." Chapter 29. Domestic Bliss and a Deer. The next 3 days were a blur of perfection. For the first time in their relationship, there was no threat. No rogues, no counsel, no audits. Just the snow, the fire, and each other. Bastion was different here. In the city, he was always scanning the room, always the king on duty. Here, he was just Bastion. He slept late. He walked around barefoot. He laughed more. On the 3rd afternoon, Piper was sitting on the rug by the fire, sketching designs for the new industrial district project. Bastion was outside on the deck, chopping wood. Piper paused to watch him through the glass. He wasn't using a log splitter. He was using an axe, swinging it with effortless, brutal grace. Every time the axe came down, the wood split with a satisfying crack. "Focus, Piper," she scolded herself. "You're a professional. Stop ogling the lumberjack." Suddenly, she heard a commotion outside. Yowl! It was Swish. Piper dropped her pencil and ran to the glass door. Outside, in the snow, a standoff was taking place. A massive buck, a large male who had miraculously not yet shed his winter rack, had wandered into the clearing, by the silence after Bastion stopped chopping. It stood frozen near the woodpile, ears twitching. Swish, who had evidently escaped through the microchip-activated pet flap, which Bastion had installed specifically for him, was stalking the deer. The cat was 20 pounds of orange fluff. The deer was 300 pounds of muscle. Swish wiggled his butt and pounced. He latched onto the deer's leg. The deer looked down, confused. It shook its leg gently. Swish flew off, landing in a snowbank. Undeterred, Swish hissed and prepared for round 2. "Oh my God!" Piper gasped, opening the door. "Swish is going to get trampled." But before she could yell, a blur of motion swept across the deck. Bastion dropped the axe. He didn't shift fully, but he moved with wolf speed. He vaulted over the railing, landing between the cat and the deer. He let out a low, warning growl at the buck. The deer's eyes went wide. It sniffed the alpha predator. It turned and bolted into the trees instantly. Bastion turned to Swish. The cat was shaking the snow off his fur, looking furious that his kill had been stolen. Bastion scooped the cat up with one hand. Swish didn't struggle. He just meowed complainingly. Bastion walked back to the deck, holding the cat like a football. "He has no survival instincts," Bastion announced, sliding the glass door open. "He tried to eat a buck, Piper, a buck." "He's ambitious," Piper laughed, taking the wet, shivering cat from him. "Like his father." Bastion froze. He looked at her, snowflakes melting in his dark hair. "His father?" Bastion asked softly. "Well," Piper shrugged, rubbing Swish with a towel. "You feed him. You protect him. You built him a house. I think that makes you Dad." Bastion looked at the cat. Then he looked at Piper. A slow, blindingly bright smile spread across his face, the kind of smile that made Piper want to marry him all over again. "Then he is grounded," Bastion declared. "No more hunting." Chapter 30. Beware of Family. On their last night at the cabin, the snowstorm cleared, leaving a sky full of stars so bright they looked fake. They lay in the massive bed, tangled in the sheets, staring out the skylight above them. "I don't want to go back," Piper whispered, tracing the line of Bastion's tattoo on his chest. I like this bubble. I like just being us. We are not going back to the same life, Bastion reminded her, his arm tightening around her. We go back as partners. The council respects you, the pack fears you, and Thomas has legally bound your enemies. Piper laughed. True, but it's going to be loud and busy. Bastion turned on his side, propping his head up on his hand. He looked down at her, his expression serious. Piper, there is something I want to ask. Piper's heart skipped a beat. What? The deed to the land Beatrice gave you. The warehouse? Yeah? I saw your sketches by the fireplace yesterday, Bastion said gently. You aren't just stabilizing the foundation. You are redesigning the interior. Piper blushed. I was just doodling. I thought, maybe it shouldn't just be a warehouse. It's near the river. It has great light. I thought, maybe a school? For the pups? A safe place, hidden inside the warehouse structure, and a community center for human spouses? A place where the two worlds can mix safely without the outside world knowing. Bastion stared at her. His eyes swirled with gold. A school, he repeated. Is it stupid? Piper asked nervously. Does the pack not do schools? It is perfect, Bastion whispered. He leaned down and kissed her, deep and slow. It is exactly what we need. You are building our future, Piper. Literally. He pulled back, resting his forehead against hers. We will build it together, and maybe, one day, our own pups will go there. Piper smiled, lacing her fingers with his. Maybe, but they'll have to deal with Uncle Thomas teaching them how to sue people during recess. We will risk it. Bastion grinned. Epilogue to the honeymoon. Before they left the next morning, Piper had one last task. She found a piece of wood in the shed and a can of black paint. Bastion watched her as he loaded the Jeep. What are you doing, ma femme? Home improvement, Piper said, finishing her masterpiece. She walked over to the massive, intimidating front door of the glass mansion. She nailed the piece of wood right next to the biometric scanner. It read, Beware of dog, and the cat, and the lawyer. Bastion looked at the sign. He looked at the vast, snowy wilderness that was his territory. He looked at the woman who had tamed him without ever trying to break him. Perfect, the Alpha King said. He grabbed her hand, led her to the car, and drove them back to the city to start their wild, loud, beautiful life. Epilogue. 1 year later, December 31st. Swish, stop eating the tinsel. That is a choking hazard. Piper chased the fat orange tabby cat across the living room of the penthouse. Swish, looking particularly round and smug, drifted around the corner with a string of silver garland trailing from his mouth. He does not listen, Bastion observed from the kitchen. Piper stopped, putting her hands on her hips. He listens to you. You're the alpha. Do something. Bastion walked into the living room. He was wearing a tuxedo, his tie undone, looking effortlessly regal. He held a tray of champagne flutes. I am the alpha of wolves, Bastion corrected. Swish is a cat. Cats recognize no gods. Bastion set the tray down and whistled. A sharp, commanding sound. Swish immediately spat out the tinsel and trotted over to Bastion, rubbing against his tuxedo trousers and purring like a chainsaw. Piper narrowed her eyes. Traitor, both of you. The penthouse looked different than it had a year ago. The wall separating Piper's unit from Bastion's had been knocked down, professionally this time, not by claws, creating one massive, sprawling residence. It was filled with Bastion's sleek, modern furniture and Piper's chaotic jungle of plants. It was perfect. Are you ready? Bastion asked, walking over to her and handing her a glass of champagne. Thomas and Patricia will be here in 10 minutes. And the rest of the pack council. I'm ready, Piper said, smoothing down her dress. It was gold this year. I have the appetizers ready, I have the playlist set, and I have a tranquilizer dart gun in case Thomas tries to give a speech. Bastion chuckled, kissing her forehead. You are ruthless. I love it. He looked at her, his eyes softening. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I know we agreed no gifts until midnight, he said, but I am impatient. Bastion, Piper warned, though she was smiling, You already paid for the entire wedding. Open it. Piper opened the box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. The charm was a tiny, intricate wolf, and riding on the wolf's back was a tiny, diamond-encrusted cat. Piper laughed, tears springing to her eyes. It's hideous. I love it. It represents our pack, Bastion said seriously, clasping it around her wrist. Strange, chaotic, perfect. Ding. The elevator chimed. They're here. Thomas's voice boomed from the foyer. And I brought fireworks. Don't tell the fire marshal. Piper groaned. I'm going to kill him. No, Bastion said, grabbing her hand and pulling her close. Let him in. It is New Year's Eve, and we have plenty of beware of dog signs if he gets out of line. Piper looked at her husband, the king of the wolves, the love of her life, and the only man brave enough to let her cat slap him. Ready? He asked. Piper squeezed his hand. Ready. Let the wild rumpus start. She turned to face the door, ready to welcome the chaos, knowing that no matter what the new year brought, she wasn't facing it alone. The end.